You are pregnant, and just like that, your body starts undertaking a huge physiological and psychological change. I think sometimes that we as women forget that during pregnancy, your entire system is adapted as your body focuses on growing a new little human being. Parts become stretched, weakened, and shifted as your little one thrives and develops. Then there is the matter of childbirth. And regardless of how this may happen for you, it's a momentous time and arguably the biggest challenge your body will ever undergo. But you can't just put your feet up and recover as a new mum. You have a baby to care for, and you are often sleep deprived. And so all too often, the incredible journey your body and mind have been on get forgotten, and your nurturing and healing are neglected. But on this week's episode, I am joined by an amazing guest, specialist women's health physiotherapist, mum, and now author, Emma Brockwell. Emma's a woman on a mission to empower and inform women about the changes taking place in the pregnant and postpartum body, and to support them on a journey to recovery in the right way. Women have for far too many years thought that many embarrassing or unpleasant conditions relating to women's health were normal and something we should just put up with. But the good news is that they are absolutely not. And Emma believes that all women should be informed and empowered with tools to look after and nurture their amazing bodies throughout pregnancy and motherhood. Emma Brockwell is a specialist pelvic health physiotherapist. She treats women of all ages with all women's health related conditions. She's passionate about pre- and postnatal rehabilitation and exercise, and specialises in enabling women back to exercise, particularly running, if they have any pelvic health dysfunction or are postnatal. She has co-authored the first Returning to Running postnatal guidelines and has spoken about this subject at many medical and exercise conferences. Emma's written for many magazines, including Women's Running and Women's Health magazine, and has a book out in February 2021 called Why Did No One Tell Me? How to Heal, Protect and Nurture Your Body Through Motherhood. Emma founded and leads a walk and running club, Oxted Ladies Running Club. She is the co-founder of Pelvic Raw, a physiotherapy-led collaboration aiming to promote and unite all things pelvic health. She's also on the advisory board for the Active Pregnancy Foundation and is an associate member to the Perinatal Physical Activity Research Group. She now works privately in Surrey and London and is the co-presenter of a new podcast called At Your Cervix. So welcome, Emma. And with that bio, I'm amazed that you've managed to give us any time. So thank you. I'm so grateful.
Oh no, I'm really grateful because I love your podcast, and I gave you a far too long bio there, didn't I? Really, let's be honest. Everyone can go now. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Well, it's good to know that we are definitely in the best hands when we start to talk about protecting our bodies. And Emma, first of all, I have to say massive congratulations on your book. By the time people can listen to this, they will be able to order it. So the link to that is just in the description. So to anyone who hasn't checked out Emma's book, I totally recommend having a little look at that. Because I just know how passionate you are about this subject.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, when I think back to when I got into pelvic health, I never, ever, ever thought I'd be lucky enough to have the opportunity to write about it. But like most of us, or a lot of pelvic health physios anyway, I guess we get into this area because potentially pelvic health has affected us. It certainly affected me during and after my pregnancies, and I'm just really grateful that I've had the opportunity to put pen to paper, because I've had a few moments, a few wobbles in the past few months when I was writing the book during lockdown, managing my kids, and thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing? But it's been an incredibly amazing experience to write about it. It's been quite stressful, but yeah, I just hope that what I've written helps even just one person with their, throughout their pregnancy and postnatal journey. So yeah, thank you for plugging it.
Emma, I've no doubt it's going to help far more than one woman. I feel like you properly undersold the book ambition. But no, that's amazing, and an amazing thing for you to achieve as well, because it must be no mean feat, especially homeschooling, and still, because I know you've still been seeing women, haven't you, in your clinic throughout lockdown. So you've been a proper full-time working mum and homeschooler and author, which is incredible.
This is what I love about mums, because when you become a mum, you realise what you can do, you know. I mean, we are very good multitaskers. And I'm personally very lucky because I have an incredibly supportive husband. I couldn't have done all of this without his support and help. But yeah, we're pretty awesome as women, aren't we? We can do a lot, as pregnancy shows. So yeah, it's been full on, and we're still in lockdown. I can't believe we're still in a lockdown, but we are.
Lockdown 3.0.
Oh God, no more. This has to be the last one, please.
Surely. I mean, things they never do like a 4th series or anything, do they? There's only ever 3, surely.
Good point. Any good series only ends in 3, so we'll go with that with COVID as well.
Oh, we are full of optimism for that. Now, Emma, talk to us about pregnancy. There's so many changes that happen to women's bodies, aren't there? Like humongous adaptations. You're literally growing another human being. What can we do to try and support our bodies during these changes?
Yeah, I think we as a society underestimate what our bodies go through. And as you say, they are massive. Everything changes: our posture, our body weight, our endocrine system, our muscle length, our muscle strength, what goes on in our brains, you know, the amount of blood that we produce. It's just incredible what our body does in such a very short space of time. And that's the big thing that we have to respect, is that so much is going on very quickly. And yes, we are superhuman as pregnant women, but we have to allow for change and also give our bodies a bit of a break. What I think is really important during pregnancy, if possible, is to prepare your body for that pregnancy journey. You can do that during your pregnancy, you don't have to do that before, but preparing it during your pregnancy for childbirth and then for your postnatal recovery is really, really essential, in my opinion. I did not have a good pregnancy. I had really severe hyperemesis during my first pregnancy, and then less so in my second. I was very sporty prior to falling pregnant, and I had this amazing, idea of how I was going to carry on my pregnancy, very active. Lo and behold, I was quite the opposite. I ended up on bed rest, more or less, because I was just so unwell. It wasn't the pregnancy I hoped for. And so I was perhaps less able to become prepared. And let's face it, some women are in that boat. And I empathise hugely with anyone in that boat. But if you are having a pregnancy where you can prepare your body, where you can exercise, remain active, you don't have to go crazy with your exercise, but remain active. Do your pelvic floor exercises, prepare your body for birth with perineal massage at the right time. Get into the right mindset even. There's just so much you can do just to be a little bit more prepared for the childbirth and postnatal journey. And I know you and I have talked about the benefits of perineal massage when we've spoken on Instagram lives. But I do think there is a lot that you can do that can just get you ready for the next stage in your pregnancy journey, really.
Definitely. And it's really empowering, I think, as well, to know that there's these things we can do to help prepare our bodies. And I always think, and you'll probably feel the same, Emma, because I know you're also a keen runner, that birth is literally like the ultimate marathon, isn't it? Like the biggest endurance event, the biggest challenge for your body.
Yes.
And we don't sign up for a marathon and then sit on the sofa for 9 months. So actually, when we sign up to this pregnancy and birth thing, we've got this amazing 9 months to start thinking about preparing ourselves psychologically and physically. And it's really important we try and embrace that and get excited for it. And understanding your body makes everything seem less frustrating if you are finding that you're not able to do things you may have wanted to. And also just respects it a little bit more by understanding the change it's making and why you might be feeling a certain way and why your hips might be sore and things like that can just be really helpful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when I was pregnant, there wasn't the social media that we had now. There wasn't the plethora of information out there. There still is a lot of confusing and conflicting information. So I think you've got to really find your resources that are evidence-based, coming from true healthcare professionals in the subject. But there is so much information out there now that hopefully women can see that if you have a low risk pregnancy, remaining active, for example, is a really positive thing to do for you and baby. And I hope over the past sort of really 9 years that I've been involved in pelvic health, I hope what we're providing offers less, there's less scaremongering involved if you're following the right people. So, what you're doing on Instagram, and what a huge amount of pelvic health physios are doing on Instagram and other midwives and doctors is just so important. And yeah, use that community on social media to help find the right path for you, but predominantly listening to your body as well. That's really key as well. So, on days where you're just not feeling up to as much, then that's perfectly fine. But it is a case of finding the right resources. If you're not sure, asking your healthcare professionals to signpost you to the right resources, listen to your body, and use this as an opportunity to explore different ways of what your body can work with, so that you can really enjoy your pregnancy and feel really empowered throughout.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I love what you say about finding people on social media. And I suppose that's something that perhaps has been quite positive with lockdown, is that there is now loads more resources. However, everyone is an expert on the internet, aren't they? So you do just have to be a little bit careful and kind of pick and choose what you might be choosing to read and kind of look at, for sure.
Yeah, it is quite difficult, isn't it? And I suppose it's easy for us because we know what the right things are that we're reading. I guess probably going to your healthcare professional that's working with you throughout your pregnancy is the best thing to do, and they will give you the signposting to those people that they're aware of on social media. So that's probably the sensible thing to do, really, is start with the person that you have that face-to-face contact with.
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to pregnancy and preparing our bodies for birth, we have this important thing called our pelvic floor. Why is it important, Emma, that our pelvic floor functions correctly? Because I think I probably speak for lots of women, and I'm totally guilty of neglecting my pelvic floor. And I love doing exercise, but if I'm honest, I can't see my pelvic floor, so I'm not as motivated to train it. But it is really important, especially in pregnancy, isn't it, that we start thinking about that?
Yeah. What do you mean you're not doing your pelvic floor exercises right now? I think the big thing with pelvic floor exercises is the ideal would be that we're doing our pelvic floor exercises before we fall pregnant. That's the dream, and I think that comes on about how we educate girls from a younger age. But if you are pregnant, your pelvic floor will lengthen because of the weight on your system. As you say, it's a muscle that we don't really tap into that much until this time in our life. If you are having a vaginal birth or a C-section, your pelvic floor will be affected just by the changes that occur during pregnancy and certainly after pregnancy as well. So like any other muscle, if you don't use it, it's not going to work as well as it could. And the pelvic floor, gosh, it has so many roles. It stops us leaking poo, stops us leaking wee. It's a muscle that helps in sexual function as well. So a good, strong pelvic floor can mean that you have a better sex life as well. It's a muscle that's the bottom of our core, so it can help in activating the tummy muscles, the deep back muscles, and potentially helping reduce low back pain and pelvic pain during pregnancy. It's a supportive muscle, and when you're pregnant and all other muscles are lengthening and weakening, it's just a muscle that can just help unite that whole muscular system, which is just so essential with all of those changes occurring. It's also a muscle that supports your pelvic organs, so your bladder, your bowel, your uterus. So if you've got a strong working muscle there, those functions are going to be better supported. And as I say, that functioning is happening pre-pregnancy, but it's also then going to happen postnatally after we've birthed. It's a muscle that's going to be traumatized no matter how you birth. So therefore, we know from the evidence that the stronger your pelvic floor is prenatally or even during pregnancy, then the better it's going to rehabilitate postnatally. We see lots of common issues, pelvic floor dysfunction occurring during this perinatal time. So you might be leaking urine, you might feel heaviness in your vaginal area, you might feel bulging in the vaginal area, you might have problems controlling your bowels as well. And all of those issues, those pelvic floor dysfunctional issues, they can be certainly reduced or improved with pelvic floor exercises, or we might even be able to prevent those issues occurring. So I think when it comes to pelvic health, we've got to think more down the preventative route. And I much prefer seeing women certainly just as they fall pregnant, so we can start them on their pelvic health journey, so that postnatally I'm not seeing them again and hearing, oh, but I'm leaking urine now. There's no guarantee that doing your pelvic floor exercises is going to stop that, but it might just reduce the chances of that happening. So yeah, it's a really important muscle, and it's just one of those muscles that isn't the most exciting to exercise, but it's such a good thing to do if you can get into your pelvic floor exercises. So start doing them now, Pippa.
Yeah, okay, noted. I'm on it. And hopefully everyone's on it with me who's listening as well. And that's a really good point though, Emma, that you say, in that we really need to be doing them for life, don't we? It isn't just for now. It really is something we need to do for life. And although they might not be the most thrilling and exciting thing to do, I mean, so much rather invest time while you're watching the telly doing your pelvic floors than having to deal with the symptoms of things like incontinence and prolapse later on, because that is a lot more tedious and frustrating than just doing your pelvic floors.
Yeah, and there was a time when we weren't particularly good with our dental hygiene, so we didn't brush our teeth twice a day, but I'd like to think most of us do that now.
I do that, yeah.
Yeah, good, excellent. So do I. And I think if you can kind of get it into your daily routine, or part of your self-care routine, honestly, once you've cracked them, you can really get on with your pelvic floor exercises. They take a few minutes, and the benefits of doing them far outweigh the pain of doing them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. What can we do to help us remind ourselves, Emma? Is there like apps that we can use, or little aid memoirs that can be quite helpful just to install it in our routine, really?
Yeah, I mean, I often just signpost patients to the Squeezy app. I just think it's the best app out there, really.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's about £2.99. It's NHS endorsed. It's actually created by a really good friend of mine, Myra Robson, and her team. And if you just want it on your phone for nothing more than just to remind you to do your pelvic floor exercises, it can ping a reminder up. Or you can use it as a means of a bit of biofeedback, so you can watch the actual diagram or the picture on it getting more orange or more green, and then you'll know when to contract and relax your pelvic floor. So that's kind of my favorite one. It's the Squeezy app. You can, of course, pop post-it notes up if you really want to, just to remind you. I have lots of women that will do their pelvic floor exercises when they're making a cup of tea, or brushing their teeth. What I would say is, when you're using it within function, your pelvic floor wants to be pretty strong, working at a pretty good level to just start exercising it. Sometimes when you start exercising it, you do need to sit down, you do need to think about it and dedicate some time to it. But once it becomes part of your routine, you can certainly do it whilst you're doing something else, so that it doesn't seem like another chore. But I think these apps like the Squeezy app are really good triggers, just if nothing else, to remind you to do it. So I would start there first and foremost.
That's amazing advice. And I suppose it's quite useful to be able to, later on, when you have started to train your pelvic floor and strengthen it, to be able to do it while you're doing other tasks, because your pelvic floor needs to be strong while you're doing other things and carrying on with your day-to-day life. I'm assuming, Emma, that most women probably don't have symptoms when they are sat down watching telly. It's more likely when they're moving around or walking and things. So we need to make sure it's functional throughout that whole range, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. The only time I wouldn't suggest that you do pelvic floor exercises, however, is when you are on the move. So when you're walking, when you're running, it's a muscle that works reflexively. So you shouldn't need to think about activating your pelvic floor. Be a bit like, I don't know, just holding your arm in a flexed position. If you held it like that throughout a run, you have a very sore muscle, bicep muscle. So you've got to let it do its thing when you're moving. But when you're potentially strength training, you can certainly use and activate it, particularly on the exertional part. So let's use squatting for an example. When you come up from the squat, that's quite a nice time to engage your pelvic floor, because we see on scans that your pelvic floor activates generally as you exhale, and so it's quite nice to exhale and lift your pelvic floor on the exertional part of an exercise, and then you're getting more bang for your buck. Your strength training, strengthening your glutes, strengthening your legs, but also activating your pelvic floor as well. So I think it's quite a nice way to think about it in that respect.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And the other thing I always find really interesting, Emma, when we think about pelvic floor, so when women are giving birth, for example, as the baby descends down the birth canal, the baby's head makes contact with the pelvic floor, and it uses that to rotate into a good position to then pass through the vagina.
Amazing.
So if your pelvic floor isn't strong and functional, that rotation isn't so easy for your baby. So it can delay birth because your baby's not in such an optimal position. And then your baby has to pass under your pelvic floor, doesn't it? So it's also important that we focus on that relaxation part and don't have a pelvic floor that's so tight that it's also just dysfunctional.
Yeah, nice. I think that's what's really key. We're not just thinking about how we squeeze your pelvic floor, we're thinking about how we relax the pelvic floor as well. Think of it like your bicep or your arm. You have to straighten it and you have to bend it to get full range of movement of the muscle. And that's what's particularly important during your labor, is that the muscle's actually going to lengthen. It's not going to squeeze the baby out, it's going to lengthen with the contractions. So I think what you see a lot in particularly, like, let's say, antenatal yoga classes, is they will focus a lot on just the relaxing of the muscle as well. And I sometimes wonder, when I look back to my pregnancy and delivery, I ended up having an emergency C-section. And because of all the vomiting that I had experienced during my pregnancy, I'm pretty sure my pelvic floor was quite tight. It was always switched on because I was just so tense. When it came to my labouring, if you like, my cervix just didn't dilate, and I honestly wonder if that whole area was so tight and not relaxed because I'd been so poorly. I don't know if there's any research in this, but I do just wonder if with women with like hyperemesis, for example, if we do need to focus more on just helping them relax prior to that stage, maybe with the benefits of hypnobirthing and some of the work that you do in your antenatal class. I've gone off on a massive tangent, but I'm just always really interested in understanding more about the lengthening of the muscle, if we need to focus more on that, particularly in our final trimester. I mean, do you think there's any is there any evidence with that let's say population of women who have hyperemesis? Do we see that happening, that they need to work on lengthening or stretching of the muscle at all?
Yeah, that's a good question, Matt. I'm not aware of any research, but it would be really interesting. And it makes sense, doesn't it? When you think, whenever you're tense or anxious, you tense your shoulders, you tense your jaw, you tense your abdominals, and by default, you're also tensing your pelvic floor. And so if we're constantly contracted, just as we get like a rick in our neck and a tense neck or a tense back, you're essentially going to cause the same. Those muscles are going to be tight and kind of in a sense of almost spasm, aren't they? So it does make, I think, physiological sense. How we could do research on that would for sure be challenging. And that's the difficulty with pregnancy, isn't it? That often we don't have these robust ways of doing evidence, because it's just really unethical to say, right, you tense the pelvic floor, you can relax it, and we'll see who births better. Like, it's so hard to make those calls and analysis, but that makes sense, right? It's not going to be helpful if we're constantly tensing our muscles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where something like the squeezy app's really good, because you can also see the relaxation as well as the contraction. So another plus for the squeezy app, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. And that visualization is really helpful in kind of trying to get that technique right, isn't it? That kind of visualizing something. And the squeezy app has that little droplet that kind of moves up and down. Yes. Are there any other visualizations that you sometimes suggest to women, Emma, just to help them because it's hard, especially if you've not seen someone like yourself take face to face. It can be really hard to make sure you've got that technique right.
Yeah, technique's really difficult. Sometimes women think they're doing their pelvic floor exercises, but they aren't always. So I guess ways that you might know if you're not doing it quite right might be if you're holding your breath, squeezing your inner thigh muscles, or really squeezing your bum cheeks, or really holding your whole abdominal muscles really tightly. Then you know that you're probably not quite getting it right. So therefore it might be good to see someone like myself or speak to your midwife about that. Ways I tend to help cue women are to think of squeezing your back passage as if you're trying to stop yourself passing wind. You can also squeeze your front passage as if you're trying to stop yourself passing urine as well. And I quite like to use breathing techniques to help in engaging the pelvic floor. So I would ordinarily suggest someone sits down, make sure that they're comfortable, take a nice deep breath in through their nose into their tummy, so the tummy just inflates a little bit, and then breathe out through your mouth as if you're blowing a balloon to the wall in front of you, and then gently squeeze your front and your back passage as if trying to stop yourself passing urine or wind, and try and hold it for up to 10 seconds. But remember, if you haven't done pelvic floor exercises before, that's quite a long hold. So you might want to start at, maybe 2 or 3 seconds initially. You want to try and do those for at least up to 10 repetitions, long holds, okay? Then you've also got to think of the fact that the pelvic floor is not only made of long twitch fibers, which are your endurance fibers, but also, slow twitch fibers, but also fast twitch fibers as well. So you want to think about exercising those. And the way you might do that is by quickly squeezing your front and your back passage quickly, but slowly releasing. I see so many women squeeze, 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 squeeze. And again, they forget that letting go as well. So squeeze quick, slowly release. And you're aiming to do at least 10 of those as well. That's the gold standard that you're building up to. But I think the squeezing of the back passage or squeezing of the anus is a really nice cue that tends to work for most of the women that I see.
Amazing. Thank you. That's really, really helpful. I'll bear that in mind when I start doing my pelvic. Now, Emma, what are some of the common symptoms that we should be looking for in the postpartum period that suggest to us that actually maybe there is a dysfunction going on with our pelvic floor and we really need to seek some professional input?
Yeah, so if you're leaking urine, when you're coughing, sneezing, laughing, or if you have the urge to go to the toilet but you can't quite make it to the toilet and then you leak, they're two certain symptoms that we might need to look at your pelvic floor a little bit more closely. If you can't control your bowels, so if you're getting any fecal urgency or incontinence where you are leaking from the back passage. Also, if you're really constipated as well, because constipation can have quite a significant impact on the pelvic floor. So if you're really struggling with your constipation and you've spoken to your GP or midwife and had some laxatives, but that's still not helping, pelvic health physios can help there with that pelvic floor dysfunction. Heaviness, dragging in the vaginal area, a bulge in the vaginal area as well. That's a sign that there might be, not definitely, but there might be signs of pelvic organ prolapse. So that's another symptom. Pelvic pain, low back pain, another symptom where potentially there's some pelvic floor, or an element of pelvic floor dysfunction. I will touch on diastasis as well, which is essentially where the linear arbor, which attaches your two six-pack muscles, so going down the whole of the midline along your belly button, that's where that tissue is slightly lengthened, if you like, and thinned, and that can give the look of a mummy tummy, if you like, almost like you might still look pregnant despite having had your baby. And there's not definitely, because we don't have the evidence out there yet, but that might be an element of pelvic floor dysfunction involved in that as well. So they would be the key signs and symptoms where I think, oh, okay, go and see a pelvic health physio, and get that assessed and treated.
Amazing. That's amazing to hear. And there's some of the things that we can look out for. Although I have to have just like a mini rant, Emma. So we kind of think when it comes to like the postpartum, and that if we've got these symptoms, then we'll go and see someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually, if you think about the amount of muscle and tissue changes that have happened to all of your body during pregnancy and birth, no matter what type of birth that might be, we should really see a pelvic health physiotherapist regardless, right? Like if you had any other kind of surgery or operation that affected a muscle, you would have like a good 6 weeks or even longer physiotherapy input, and you'd have an exercise kind of portfolio to follow, and you'd be getting feedback on how that was healing. But when it comes to pregnancy and birth, we kind of sign you off from your midwife at 10 days and we're like, see you later. Oh, and watch out for your contraception. And that's it, isn't it? That's all we get. It's rubbish.
Oh,
that's my rant.
I'm going to join you in that rant. It drives me bonkers. I know the 10-year NHS plan is that every woman that has a baby will see a pelvic health physiotherapist. The problem with the plan is there aren't enough pelvic health physiotherapists, and there's an awful lot of women having babies every year. So I think massively outnumbered. So, you know, I'm delighted, I'm ecstatic that's the plan, and the system sees the value in that. I think if you feel you need to see a pelvic health physiotherapist, speak to your GP or your midwife, ask for that referral. It might take a few months, but even if you're 6 months down the line and you're still asymptomatic, which is great, still see that pelvic health physiotherapist, because we have seen research that shows that women who aren't symptomatic at the time of their initial postnatal recovery do start becoming symptomatic within 5 years of having had their baby. And I'm not saying that to frighten anyone or worry anyone. I mean, that cue should just be enough just to do your pelvic floor exercises, which will help dramatically. But I just think that we just don't seem to get acknowledged for this huge thing we've just been through, and the fact that our bodies change and they do need rehabilitating, and that's perfectly fine and, in my opinion, essential. One thing I will just add, to your last question about symptoms, which I do think is sometimes not considered as such a pelvic floor dysfunction, two symptoms are if you cannot control wind, and if you also have painful sex. Sorry, there were two symptoms that I just wanted to get across, because they are two key symptoms as well, that pelvic floor isn't quite perhaps as happy as it could be. So, you know, with or without symptom, pelvic health physio is the way forward postnatally, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely, Emma. And I think that's a message that we just need to get across, because I don't think women realise, and I think we've just accepted that we just deal with whatever. And actually we really need to start driving and pushing for that change, because it is so important that our bodies are looked after. And the NHS Squeezy app that we talked about, they've got a directory on there, haven't they? So you can actually search literally via your postcode and find all of your local NHS and private pelvic health physios. And as Emma rightly said, the NHS does have a waiting list, but I think sometimes it's worth looking at pelvic health and seeing a private physiotherapist as something that we can really consider and plan for. We spend as women so much money on hundreds of nice white or grey brand new baby grows, and like the best designer pram, and all of these wonderful but really materialistic things. Let's be honest, that's entirely unnecessary. We don't need to have a baby that's got like 3 designer wardrobes and brand new Converse trainers. Actually, if we could try and save some of that money and plan for this during pregnancy or your lead up to pregnancy, and just pop a little bit of money aside if you possibly can, so you can invest that in your own health and wellness, because oh my goodness, you will reap the benefit.
Oh, hugely. You gave me a really nice idea when we spoke a few weeks ago about popping, as instead of asking friends on a oh my gosh, what's the party that you have?
Baby shower gifts.
Thank you.
Those grey baby
wow.
grows.
Yeah, I had a massive blank there. And you had a great idea of what about vouchers to HelloFresh we were talking about postnatal nutrition. I am seeing more and more women get as a baby shower gift a postnatal check, which I think is a great idea. There should be no guilt associated with a bit of self-care and allowing to nurture your body. I mean, it's just so important. And yes, it's not the most glamorous assessment. No, it's not going to feel relaxing like a massage, but it just is so invaluable, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's another really great tip. It's about prioritizing ourselves a little bit, isn't it? Our baby is
100%.
not going to remember those designer clothes, but actually our pelvic floor will remember that good assessment and that ongoing plan. So it's just something to bear in mind. Actually, maybe start planning for that in your pregnancy if you are able to. Yeah. Okay, that's the lecture over and my little rant over. Now, we've talked a little bit about kind of healing from birth and how pelvic floor exercises really form part of that. But how soon can we do them? Is there too soon, or is it just great to crack on when we can?
Do you mean in terms of postnatally or?
Yeah, sorry, postnatally with our kind of recovery.
Yeah, pretty much as soon, if you end up having a catheter put in during delivery, make sure the catheter is removed. But once catheter is out, you can start your pelvic floor exercises. That would be the first exercise I'd recommend starting after having a baby. And I don't mean referring back to the 10-second holds 10 times and the 10 fast reps. I literally mean just lying on your side, perhaps when you're feeding baby, and just squeezing and relaxing your pelvic floor. You might not feel it initially, because the initial feeling that you might find when you're really cracking on with your pelvic floor exercises is that lift of your perineal area. You might not feel anything. That doesn't matter. Just start engaging that muscle. It will get blood to the area. It will encourage any healing that might need to occur around there. And just every few hours tap into the muscle and use it, because the sooner you start activating it, the sooner you're going to rehabilitate it.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point, actually, that you say that in that immediate postpartum, you might not have that normal sensation. And I suppose that's why it's so important to have developed that prior to this point, so that you do know what you're working towards, because it's really hard to know that you're doing it in the right way or engaging the right muscle if you've never done it before. And then you're trying to do it for the first time with that altered sensation kind of post-birth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just so important. And don't have big expectations. I mean, just don't have big expectations initially in those first few weeks anyway. But it's just worth doing, and it really doesn't need to consume your time at all when you're doing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes it feels like another thing to fit in, doesn't it? But actually, like you say, it totally slots into your life. And when you're feeding your baby, which we're going to be doing a lot in that immediate period, it's a really great time to do it, because you can't do anything else. So, why not? Now, when it comes to more kind of movement and exercise with our bodies post-birth, one of the things we see plastered all over the media, which is mighty unhelpful, is that like bounce back, get your body back. Celebrities looking like beach body ready at like 4 or 6 weeks postpartum. So frustrating, so unrealistic, and so edited. I mean, it's just not thoughtful or helpful or healthy. Is it really, really important that we don't rush? And how do we know when our body is ready? Because my body's different from your body, to my friend's body, to my mum's body. We're all unique, aren't we? We've all had a different journey.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing. It's based on the individual. So what's right for you might be very different from what's right for your friend in NCT, in your NCT class. The key thing is, I'd say initially, to listen out to your body. What signs and symptoms are you presenting with, particularly from a pelvic health perspective and pain perspective? And let's say you're leaking urine, for example. I would not recommend you start running 2 weeks into your postnatal recovery, because unfortunately impact is likely to make it a lot worse. You've got to think about rehabilitating as you would if you'd sprained your ankle. Okay, so if you'd sprained your ankle, you wouldn't go back to the sport you desperately want to do initially. You'd build up, and it's about building blocks. So whether you are a recreational exerciser, even if you don't do much exercise, or if you're an elite athlete, you need to start from the beginning, from basics. So your pelvic floor exercises, engaging your core. There are some little exercises that you can get hold of if you go to the POGP website, and I think it's called Fit for Future. There's a little leaflet on there which give you some basic core exercises that you can start. And I would start those exercises in the first 0 to 2 weeks, regardless of how you've delivered. And then you're going to listen to your body after that, because being a mum is a very active job. And as you said in your intro, you can't just rest and recover as I'd normally have you rest and recover after having surgery, let's say for your knee. So you have to listen to your body. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting the right food? Are you drinking enough? It's about treating you as a whole, essentially. But from about weeks 2 to 4, you could start doing a little bit of strength training with your body weight. So some squatting, some lunging, things that feel really comfortable and very low impact. Then from 4 to 6 weeks, you might want to increase a little bit of weight in those exercises. You might even want to dabble in a bit of an exercise bike if you have one, or gym access if we weren't in lockdown. Walking is essential, and I'd have you walk from day one, just little and often as your body allows, listening to your energy levels and any pain that you might have. When you go from 6 weeks onwards, that's when you can start ramping up the strength training a little. That's when you might want to start exploring pushing up your cardio work a little bit more. And again, it's listening to what your body can cope with. Myself, Gráinne Donnelly and Tom Goom wrote some return to running postnatal guidelines, which guide you more into that impact, which we say collectively we're saying a 12-week return to higher impact exercise, but as we've just touched on, that's very much based on the individual. So some of you might return to running at 8 weeks, some of you might return to running at 18 weeks, but with the help of a pelvic health physio, they can help guide you in that direction. But fundamentally, you can download those for free, and within it is an infographic which gives you a 0 to 12 week exercise progression, and gives you a rough idea of potentially what you can expose your body to, so long as you feel comfortable and you're not symptomatic with those exercises. But it's about building blocks. That's the most important message to get across.
Taking it steady, isn't it, and listening to yourself. We totally underestimate, I think, sometimes the power of our intuition, and knowing our body, and it's so important that we don't have this kind of comparison with some of the stuff we see in the media, and we're just gentle with ourselves.
Yeah, bounce back is a myth. Okay, well, I mean, how many women do we see postnatally? I mean, it's very rare that I'll see a Victoria Beckham 4 weeks postnatally there are the rare women where their body just pinged back. But just because the look of their body is pinged back doesn't mean that internally they're ready to do the things that they might want to do as well. So that's the other thing to think about. Don't always be deceived by look. You have to think about all of us building up our muscular strength and capability.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Your body could look really functional on the outside, but actually internally there's some serious weaknesses that are going to cause long-term symptoms. What are the risks, Emma, with someone returning to more high impact exercise sooner than their body's ready? Can that cause kind of more harm in the long term, or is it just that they're going to have to put up with these unpleasant symptoms?
Yeah, I think if you return too soon and you're lucky enough not to have symptoms at that point, I guess I was like that. I returned after about 5 weeks. I was desperate to return to run because I hadn't been running during my pregnancies or my first pregnancy. And you know what? I did pretty nicely for a few months. I had no pain, any problems. And then 6 months later, developed a nice little prolapse and some low back pain, severe low back pain actually, which did mean that I couldn't then run for another 18 months. Now I'm just giving you my journey. That might not happen for you. But you do have to remember that you're exposing potentially your body to exercise it's not just ready for. And therefore, if you haven't got pelvic floor issues, you could create pelvic floor issues. That's not definite, but we do see a patterning of that. So the temptation is there. I get it. If you haven't got any symptoms, I understand why you'd want to get back to running. But all I can say is do as I say, not as I did. I didn't have the level of knowledge that I had then, just to be clear. I should just add a massive caveat there. I wasn't in pelvic health at that point.
But runners are notorious for that anyway, aren't they? I mean, we're the worst kind.
Awful. Never listen to ourselves, never listen to our bodies. You know when it's not right, and it's blooming hard work returning to run after any injury. And certainly, I don't care what anyone says, but any runner is hard work after having a baby despite symptom. So it makes sense, doesn't it, just to build up, but be prepared for the fact that you are potentially exposing yourself to pelvic health issues. And I'm a huge advocate for us all exercising. I think it's so important, and we do have to weigh up the mental health, physical health benefits. Especially in COVID, I'm seeing a lot of women who are desperate just to get out have some me time. But remember, you don't necessarily have to run. You could just go for a really awesome power walk. You can still have your me time. And I just think we need to, respect our bodies and nurture our bodies just for a little bit longer than perhaps we might always want to do.
I love that word nurture, because we spend all this time nurturing these little babies and completely neglect ourselves. And I think that's where I know we spoke about kind of baby shower gifts and things, but if someone can provide something that's for mum, that helps to nurture mum, whatever that might be, that's really important, isn't it? Everyone's nurturing the baby, but let's not forget this mum who's been through this amazing thing. They really do need lots of nurturing too.
Oh yeah, and they need to not feel guilty about it as well,
Yeah.
because the amount of women I say that speak to me and say, "Oh, do you know, I just love to pop out for half an hour when my husband gets home from work and just have a walk, but I feel really bad because baby needs me, my husband needs me, he's been at work all day, or partner needs me. It might not just be a husband." And I think, oh my goodness, you have to give yourself this time, because the happier you are, the happier your family or unit is, and that's what's key, really.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something we really need to prepare for during pregnancy, isn't it? How we're going to manage that postpartum period. And certainly I encourage all mums, when they do their kind of birth preference planning, is to think about that postpartum period as well. What makes you feel good? What makes you feel positive and protects your mental health? Brilliant. Capture those things now while you're not so sleep deprived and you're feeling fairly normal, so that when it comes to that postpartum and things can be really challenging, especially in the current times, you've got a resource that you can go and look at and be like, right, today I'm taking 20 minutes to do this thing, because I know for me that's part of my nurturing and healing, and I need to do that for me. And in the grand scheme of the 24-hour period that you have looking after your baby, 20 minutes is nothing. They're not going to miss you for that 20 minutes. You might feel guilty, but they're quite happy with somebody else.
Oh yeah, and I remember feeling that way. And actually, the more I did it, the more I realised. In fact, I was slightly disappointed when I'd get back and realise that my son had clearly not noticed that I'd not even been there.
Yeah.
So I think it's about just treating yourself. And I'm seeing as well, I'm sure you are, just that rise in mental health is with lockdown and COVID, it's definitely on the increase. And I do think exercise has a huge role to play beneficially with that. So embrace it, find your me time, find the thing that you love, and just embrace it, and don't feel guilty about it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess leading on from mental health, Emma, if we have got these symptoms of a dysfunctional pelvic floor, that does impact your mental health for sure, doesn't it? If you're leaking urine when you go for a jog because that's what you like doing, then that has a massive impact on your mental health. So by investing this time in your kind of pregnancy and womanhood, really, you are also protecting your mental wellness, which is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we see a huge correlation with pelvic floor dysfunction and mental health. We've just done a really interesting research study with Dr. Izzy Moore, Gronya Donnelly and myself did it, and we questioned, I think we got 2,000 women on our questionnaire, just to find out what affected their return to run postnatally. And two of the key things were fear of movement, and also heaviness in the vagina. So that heaviness, as I said earlier, can be a sign of prolapse, not necessarily, but that's a key pelvic floor issue that women are very anxious about, and definitely affects their mental health and their feeling of self-worth, and their ability to exercise. So it's just so important that we are getting in and seeing women before these issues happen, or if they're happening, get in early to try and help resolve them.
Yeah, definitely. And that mum guilt, mums not worrying about spending time to nurture and heal their bodies, their nutrition, their exercise, their mental wellness. We need to focus on these in that postpartum and that pregnancy period. It needs to be part of the whole thing. So we really appreciate what amazing things our bodies are doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Emma, I need to just talk a little bit more about your book before I let you go anywhere. I'm so sorry. I know you find it really cringy, but
I do.
It's called Why Did No One Tell Me? So how did you come up with that title? I love it.
Yeah, this was interesting, this title, because it kind of came to me really quickly, because it's one thing that women always say to me in clinic postnatally: oh, why did just no one tell me that I might leak urine after having a baby, or why did no one tell me I might experience a perineal tear? And I was just so fed up with hearing it, because I just thought, yeah, you're damn right. Why didn't we tell you? It's certainly something I thought to myself after my first. Why didn't anyone tell me that I might have some issues if I returned to running too soon? And it came up, and I mentioned it to my editor, who's awesome, and she was unsure for a while. But turns out the whole team at Ebury, or part of Penguin, loved it. And I just think it resonates with so many women during and after their pregnancy. I don't know, this is what we're all about, isn't it? This is why you and me are having this conversation. We're just trying to disseminate the right information that not only informs but empowers. And that's the premise of the book. That's why I'm hoping that I answer that question, so that hopefully when my kids are older, certainly my daughter, I have a stepdaughter as well, I really hope that they never ever have to ask that question to their healthcare professionals when they have children. So that's the goal anyway.
Oh, what an amazing motivation behind it. I love that. And you're so right. We really need to start talking about these issues. We don't just want to talk about the pregnancy glow and the lovely, buggy walks. We need to talk about the fact that, almost 90% of women sustain some perineal trauma, that a quarter of women give birth by cesarean. We need to talk about these, because that's why women feel so alone and so disempowered by their birth experience, because they don't realise how many people are going through the same thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We just need to normalise it. We need to break the taboos, break down the barriers. This is something we've been doing for millions of years. And doesn't it annoy you that in 2021 we're almost while we're still having this conversation? I just feel we should be way ahead of the curve by now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, which is why we're both trying to rally some real honest information out there to get in front of women. Now, Emma, everyone that comes on, I always ask for 3 top tips. So I wondered whether you could share your 3 top tips that you would like to tell a new or expectant mum.
Oh, okay. So I think my first tip would be prepare. Prepare as much as you can, either before you feel pregnant or certainly during your pregnancy, for not only your pregnancy, but childbirth and postnatal recovery. And we've spoken about how you can do that just with something as simple as pelvic floor exercises, for example, and being as active as you can during your pregnancy. The next tip I would say is pelvic floor issues are really common, but they aren't normal, and they are very treatable as well. So if you are struggling with any of the pelvic floor symptoms that we've discussed, or worried that you might struggle with them later on in life, see a pelvic health physiotherapist. Discuss it with your healthcare professionals during and after your pregnancy, because, as I say, they're treatable, and actually it's much more simple to treat than you might think. So that would be my second tip. And my final tip would be really that the bounce back myth is rubbish. And we all need to nurture our bodies postnatally, take our time, accept the fact that likelihood is you aren't just going to bounce back. And that's perfectly normal, and rightly so, given all the bodily changes that have occurred. And if you can see a pelvic health physiotherapist to help you recover and rehabilitate, then that is, I think, the best gift you can give yourself postnatally. So they would be my 3 tips.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Emma. And to anyone who has got any other questions about pelvic health physio, please don't reach out to me, because I will not be able to answer them anywhere near as well as Emma. But Emma's Instagram is linked in the description bio as well, so you can always get in touch and check out all of her amazing resources on there too. Thank you so much for your time, Emma. I will let you get back to the joys of homeschooling in lockdown.
Please don't. Let's carry on. No, thank you so much for having me. I love what you're doing. And if you want to talk for another half an hour, so I don't have to go and do year 1 or year 2 maths, I'm quite happy to stay. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye.